Are you looking at restrictions on indoor mixing this Christmas? Can families be reassured that that is not going to happen now?
Well, as the Prime Minister set out yesterday, we keep these issues under close review. Obviously, there's considerable uncertainty within the Omicron data. We're concerned about the increasing growth in cases, particularly in London, but there is a considerable time lag between those catching the infection and presenting as cases at hospital. And of course that needs to be looked in the round alongside the booster campaign, the increase in treatments, the changes in behaviour as a consequence of Plan B, which will also have an impact on those hospital admissions. So that's why we're looking so closely at the hospital data, particularly around London, where Omicron is more prevalent, and we're balancing that against the wider economic consequences of any further restrictions, which also carry health risks for reasons, Tamara, you've often highlighted on the programme in terms of the mental health consequences, for example, as well as those wider economic consequences.
Of course, hospital data is hugely important. Are you expecting any more data this week? Is there a critical point coming up where you think that decision will need to be made?
Well, we're getting data all the time on an hour-by-hour, day-by-day basis, both internationally. We're looking at data, although there are issues around the comparability of that. People often will say, for example, look at the South African data. We need to be conscious that the age profile is different. It's summer there as opposed to winter here. Their healthcare system is different. So we're looking internationally at data, whether in South Africa, whether in Denmark or elsewhere. We're looking regionally at the different profiles, for example, London, where over 88% of cases presenting as admissions are Omicron compared to 44% in the North East. So we're looking at regional data. We're also looking, for example, at the ONS data, where they have a gold standard in terms of the survey they conduct. So we're looking at a range of factors. And of course, that needs to be balanced alongside the economic consequences of further restrictions, which are very severe and have a real impact on the livelihoods and the businesses of many of your viewers.
Obviously, the hospitality industry and others, the entertainment industry as well, having a really tough time already as people choose to stay at home. Are we going to get an announcement from the Chancellor today on what more support might be made available?
Well, firstly, of course, there is some existing support that we should be conscious of, for example, on business rates, on VAT. So there is existing support as part of the wider package of measures that the Treasury has provided throughout the COVID pandemic. But of course, you're quite right, as a consequence of Plan B, we have seen behaviour change. So we therefore need to distinguish between what are some of the shorter term impacts versus some of the longer term asks. The Chancellor has been discussing that with business leaders. He was on a series of calls with business leaders yesterday evening, and he will have more to say about that later today.
My last question, Mr. Barclay, is Patrick Vallance has always said, the Chief Scientific Officer has always said, with restrictions you need to go earlier than you want, broader than you want, harder than you want. Otherwise, if you wait till the hospitals fill up, it can be too late. Are you alive to that concern? Is that something that ministers, you feel your colleagues are aware of when they're resisting restrictions?
Well, you're absolutely right that time has a consequence, and Sir Patrick has made that point quite rightly in terms of the path of the pandemic. But at the same time, decisions have an economic consequence in terms of further restrictions, the impact on businesses. Your previous question was about the impact on the hospitality industry, so that's exactly the sort of thing we need to weigh up. But we also need to look at that in the round in terms of the new treatments, the antivirals that are now available that weren't previously, the booster campaign, particularly with those most at risk of hospital admissions. Those older age groups are those most likely to have been boosted, and also the impact of Plan B itself. So these are the issues. So Sir Patrick's right that time has a cost, but at the same time we need to look at the consequence of decisions in terms of economic measures, and that's exactly what Cabinet discussed yesterday.